Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for joining us for lunch. Please take your seats. We're very excited for our next speaker, who is also going to be the host of our patient panel this afternoon. This is Mattha Busby.
Thank you very much. Very kind.
Please give our full attention to his talk about some of the downsides of not following the ethical and safety and wise practices that we've had so brilliantly demonstrated from Dr. Hinson and the rest of our international ibogaine panel. So no further ado.
Thank you very much. Shall I use this? Yeah, I think I'm connected. Well, hey guys, good afternoon. Lovely to be with you all today. So is this the clicker for the slides? Yeah, there we go. All right. So yeah, I would start just by saying that psychedelics have played a huge role in my life. In 2019, purely for personal purposes and to explore the world, I went on a trek to Wirikuta, which is the Mecca for the Peyote people in Mexico, and where it grows on a great desert plain. And yeah, that was really, I would look at that really as the beginning of a profound journey of healing. Several years later, after the untimely death of my dear father, my brother and I, we tripped on Hawaiian baby seeds, it's like LSA, a natural form of LSD, together in an Airbnb, a week or two after Dad's passing, and really brought us together. Psychedelics have this incredible ability to bring down the ego and just allow for connections that we might not otherwise make, even with our nearest and dearest. And last year, I contributed this chapter for a book published in the UK on why do we take drugs. So this is all to say that I'm hugely sympathetic to this current moment and the objectives of it. And I have two books which you can check out if you're interested later down there. One on drug policy, one focused on psychedelics. And over the last 10 years, I've increasingly been writing about psychedelics and drug policy. Here I spoke to a woman who had anorexia, and she had a 10-year remission. Unfortunately, she did go back into the anorexia, but a transformative MDMA journey, gave her that 10 years, and God willing, she'll be able to have a longer period of remission soon in the future. And here are a few other stories in Wired, Guardian, Daily Beast, Vice, and The Observer over the last couple of years. And so, ibogaine, iboga, hasn't been sort of in the collective consciousness for long at all, really. It was in, I think, the 1972 presidential race. This chap, Muskie, what was his first name? Edmund, yeah. So Hunter S. Thompson, he was kind of just fooling around with his gonzo journalism, and I think he supported McGovern, who was going against him for the Democratic nomination, and he claimed that Muskie was high on iboga, and people seemed to believe him, and it caused a bit of a moment. And here's like an early story by Wired talking about the potential of ibogaine. And I think this was the story that really kind of got everyone's attention in Time, interviewing Amber and Marcus Capone, whose work has been so central to getting ibogaine on the map and getting it studied inside ibogaine, one of the most promising and perilous psychedelics for addiction. And I think that for a lot of people, advocates of reform, this kind of equivalency between promising and perilous is a source of frustration sometimes, and maybe people think that maybe that's unfair. Like, it's not a 50-50 chance that you have a bad experience or a good experience, or indeed that you survive and die. Clearly not. But I think, as I'm going to outline, there are some really serious risks. And it's not just of ibogaine necessarily, but it's of the people that are facilitating these experiences. And I guess, yeah, the cultural and legal context that has led, you know, these particular people to be, yeah, in these positions now. And so, yeah, in 2022, I was having conversations for a press officer, for another story, and I kind of wanted someone to give me a particular perspective on something. And he was like, hey, you need to speak to this guy. So I spoke to him, had a good conversation, and he was like, hey, I'm opening this ibogaine clinic. It's going to be like state of the art, you know, industry leader. You should come and do it. It's like an overnight cure for addiction. And yeah, I hadn't actually heard of ibogaine at that point. Actually, it was just when I was, you know, really getting, you know, deeper into psychedelic journalism. And so, yeah, after some consideration, a bit more back and forth, I ended up, you know, going there and doing the treatment in this, you know, ICU bed. Yeah, this is before I ingested the drug. And so, yeah, in the story, I write that, you know, most people come to Beyond in Cancun, yeah, to get off drugs, including prescribed painkillers and you know, other you know, illegal drugs. And yeah, the doctor told me that he had treated, including a previous clinic, 2,000 patients over 17 years and had never had a death. And about 50% of the people, you know, long-term, you know, clean from drugs, which is great. And 85% of them leave the clinic without withdrawals and cravings. And I think that, you know, broadly matches up with some of the data. I mean, a lot of the data is, you know, in its early stages. And so, yeah, as I got ready to get into that intensive care bed, the day before, they did, you know, very diligently, was checking my like levels for electrolytes, you know, potassium and whatnot, and magnesium. That's like a big thing with ibogaine. But yeah, they hit a nerve. They put it into the side of my wrist, the IV, and it was really excruciating pain. I think I have a reasonable pain tolerance. It was completely excruciating. And so I screamed, and you know, the nurse actually froze. And so another nurse had to come into the room. And at that point, I was banging on the wall. Like I was, you know, freaking out. Because, you know, the dude's just like, like Madame Tussauds. Like, and so anyway, another nurse comes in, we sort it out. But then, you know, they kind of gaslighted me. You know, they're kind of like, this couldn't possibly have caused you that much pain. Like, why are you causing this commotion, right? All right, fine. It was very painful. And so the next day, anyway, I do the trip, and it was incredible. It was really incredible. So one of the most significant visions, I would say, was seeing this kind of, you know, fly on the wall view of my younger self. And it begins crazy. Like, I can't see the back of my head right now, right? But it's almost like, you know, you can be a fly on the wall. So I don't know, you know, what is accessing. You can get into some sort of trippy ideas like the Akashic realm or some sort of all-seeing, all-knowing God. Maybe that is Akasha. Some people say it would. Yeah, really healing, just seeing myself kind of smiling, right? Connecting with being a child. Having these visions of the Babongo, the Bwiti people in Gabon, kind of seeing the bush that I presume is from where they extracted this particular ibogaine that I was taking, and seeing like the tribesmen, they weren't exclusively men, it seemed, you know, dancing. And yeah, it was really incredible. And then I had this vision, yeah, a very gnarly vision. I won't leave it up on the screen for long, but that just to get a sense, because I'd never seen that Mel Gibson movie, The Passion of the Christ. This was the most vivid vision you could imagine of Christ's crucifixion, you know, crown of thorns, everything. And I had gone to a Church of England school, but yeah, I wasn't particularly connected to Christianity. And yeah, that was very profound to me as well, actually, and really connected to me to, yeah, faith and God. And so, yeah, I do the trip, and yeah, it's pretty good. And yeah, we'll get into a bit more of that later. So this is the clinic though. And yeah, I guess just with the passage of time, I'm just a bit like, are you guys like that serious, you know? No, it's not available right now. Can we do that? All right, so basically the video is like, all the staff there, they're kind of like, of course I'm microdosed to look after my mental health. Like, I'm a psychedelic nurse. Of course I've got cool tattoos. Of course I'm a psychedelic nurse and I'm like got funky clothes on and this dude's just wearing like kind of disco outfit to work. And I don't know. Look, personally, I don't want them. I don't want that, them kind of, being responsible to potentially bringing me back to life. But yeah, it just feels not serious and like they're all in their 20s. And so on the penultimate day of my, time there, which did otherwise go well, I meet this chap, we'll call him David. And he comes in, he's like a New Yorker, like talking a mile a minute. Cool guy, but got like an air of intensity. He comes in, talks to everyone for 5 minutes, then goes outside and like chain smokes 3 cigarettes, like that type of guy, right? But then I find out, after I'd left and everything, that he died at the clinic. And it had only been open a couple of weeks, right? And this is like, marketing themselves as like the leader, endorsements from Gabor Mate, Rick Doblin, and what have you. And so this story got published in Rolling Stone sometime after. And, I know that, this clinic has done, a bunch of successful treatments. So, we do need to bear that in mind. But it's like, wow, someone's died in the first couple of weeks. And so, yeah, I mentioned, I mean, there's going to be disagreement over the actual figure, how many people's lives have been transformed by ibogaine. It could be 10,000, probably is more. And I found this, very, very prescient. The issue, and this is partly a consequence of prohibition as well, right? The issue is that many wish to heal others as they too were healed by this medicine, and this can be dangerous, right? When former people who are dependent on drugs get into running a clinic, often, very soon after such healing and transformation and then their addiction. And yeah, some relax their own rules, processes, and procedures, and this is where the proverbial can hit the fan. And there are cases of clinics getting into business with their former patients, and yeah, all sorts of questionable things, I would say. And so after the Rolling Stone story came out, literally like 2 hours after, the clinic posted this on their Instagram, using the same name for the chap that's died as a pseudonym, right? So I've just published a story about David in Rolling Stone dying, and then the clinic 2 hours later just published this Instagram testimonial attributed to a man named David saying, ibogaine gave me the best opportunity for a future and the protocols are world class. And then I think in the comments, please go to beyond, quote unquote. And, I don't want to get sued out here, but that left me incredulous, right? Like, I know David's a popular name, but, what are the chances really that was a coincidence? Although it might be possible. And so, yeah, the whole marketing strategy of some of the places, that are emerging, and indeed you could imagine this will be, a strategy that many other places will pursue, and indeed, the ayahuasca retreat centers that are kind of above ground in Central America also get celebrities in. This is the Wolf of Wall Street, the original Wolf of Wall Street, right? What was his name again? Jordan Belford, yeah. So he insists he did actually pay for his treatment, to be fair, but he posts this thing on Instagram, TikTok, gets a huge amount of attention, and I mean he's still there. He's still there in the compound. Like I don't know when he like came off the medicine, right? But like everyone, like I just made this joke at lunch, like, hey, I just did an ecstasy pill. It's so great. Like everyone's gonna like be like that. If there's, do you know what I mean? If it's still in the afterglow of the experience. And I certainly do hope though that he is still kind of off Suboxone, and there's no suggestion to the contrary. But for the story, I spoke to psychedelic ethics guru Joseph Adams, and he's saying that these testimonials really don't actually hold much significance without long-term follow-up, right? So when you see retreat centers and clinics that are just filled up their grid on Instagram just with these like testimonials that have been immediately taken after, it's just like, I don't know, that doesn't add much value for me personally. And also, are these celebrities, possibly in many cases psychedelic naive celebrities, really the best arbiters of whether this establishment is kosher and whether their protocol is decent? Really, I think it would be more enlightened to get actually the real experts along to actually do some sort of in-depth like study with follow-up, and maybe even go through the treatment themselves rather than celebrities, so long as they're up for it. And yeah, on top of that, I think there's just a lot of over-promising as well. I mean, we deliver fast, pain-free detox. I mean, that's just impossible. Like, that is literally impossible, and that's like the top line on their Google. And so anyway, I will reiterate, I did have a positive experience, and as I was like coming down from it, I pretty much stayed up all night, because you do it in the day. And I was in their like kind of living room lobby, and I pick up this book. There's a bunch of ibogaine, iboga books on the bookshelf. Heart Medicine, A True Love Story. And it was kind of written in the form of a novel. And I really sped through it. I loved it. It was, yeah, a couple's quest for iboga and the cure for addiction. The author had convinced her husband, after he'd relapsed on heroin, to do ibogaine. And yeah, he had an immediately transformative experience, apparently never even drank coffee again, never mind drugs. And so I emailed her basically, just being like, thanks so much, a few days later, a few weeks later, thanks so much for your book. Really made an impact on me, helping my process, kudos to you, fantastic writing. And then they said, oh, we actually have a retreat center in Costa Rica. So you should come and try like the sacred root, like the real thing, suggesting, ibogaine is maybe like a bit more diluted. And so at the time, and this was over 3 years ago, and as I showed you earlier, I was reporting this Vice story, and I was like, well, yeah, maybe like, doing it the indigenous way will add something to the story. So yeah, I go there, and yeah, this is us doing some sort of like flower ritual, like blessing the medicine, and this is his altar. And yeah, I have like a good experience. Like, I realized I should just explain a little bit about my experience before going to the next slide. I had a good overall experience, but there were some things that I found troubling at the center. Like as I arrived, like there was like maintenance workers, just doing a few like extra bits and pieces. Like it turned out they just moved in there like the day before, and they hadn't done a ceremony there or anything, right? And like they'd basically taken over this old hotel, and the mattresses were, maybe I'm a bit precious, but the mattresses were literally from the 60s. So you could literally like feel the fucking, especially after doing the iboga, like feel the like coils in your back. So I end up sleeping on the floor. So it was just all a bit, slapdash. And these guys are the leaders. So you've got this clinic that's on the one side, they're the leaders. And these guys, also getting, publicized in the MAPS bulletin and what have you, going on all the podcasts, they're positioning themselves. And indeed, some people are talking them up as also the leaders. I wasn't, going to go to anywhere. It was because these guys were the leaders that I, chose them for the story. And so, yeah, after all of that, it turned out that, poor Lauren Leavis, she died a year after I'd been there. And, some people do say that, like, there is a risk of death with iboga, as we know, with the suggestion that there could be like some, given all the benefits and the transformations people can have, everything, with veterans, healing their PTSD and traumatic brain injury, it's almost like, well, if 1,000 people have benefit, maybe like one person's death is kind of okay. And like, that's obviously a like calculation that has to be made in medicine. But I don't feel like, these places are kind of telling people that the risk of death is significant enough that people actually might die, And so, yeah, this was published in Vice. I don't know if this is going to load because the other one didn't. Let's see. Maybe I should have logged myself in. Oh, here we go. But we don't have volume, alas. Oh, perhaps we might.
Listen to that calling. Busby.
All right, we tried. So, I guess, yeah. I mean, it's not particularly complimentary of this gentleman who used the word motherfucker very liberally, which I found surprising for a shaman. But he's playing the mouth harp. He's actually very good at the mouth harp. No, it is beautiful, and some of the Bwiti music, is great.
Well, wait, now hit the bottom and say the word. You can hold this up for the later.
All right.
Chor was in Africa before.
Yeah, it was like an all-women's retreat.
When does one know when they are ready for the medicine? It's when one is chosen by the medicine. So listen to that calling. Busby.
Yeah, so people will take differing views on that. I don't find that personally. We can go to the next slide. I don't find that personally very persuasive, and I even find it quite creepy. And yeah, I think there's just questions here about who is really leading this movement. I think we can get lost sometimes at these conferences, and hear overwhelmingly from kind of scientists and academics who aren't and that's not their role to be out there in the psychedelic underground and at these retreats and stuff. But I think there can be a kind of disconnect because it's like, well, who's going to end up running these retreats? Who's going to end up running these clinics? So I think we do need to have an awareness as the stuff's being kind of mainstreamed about like what's really happening out there. And yeah, after Lauren's very sad death, they really ran the family around the houses, and it caused a whole heap of trauma more. And I understand that they'd never had a death before, and it must have been traumatizing for them too. And what does one do in that situation? And with prohibition, of course, prohibition is the root of many of these issues in part. But nevertheless, I do think that the way they dealt with it raises serious questions, to say the least, including the allegation that the lawyer contacted the family and initially suggested that Lauren hadn't even actually taken iboga. And so I kind of changed the title of the talk, to sort of what happens when breaking open the head goes wrong. The talk I kind of based this on, I gave at Breaking Convention in the UK in April, which was a little bit more oriented towards like the dark side of shamanism itself. And I think that they kind of, needs to be an awareness that, we can't completely understand psychedelics in sort of a materialist, solely scientific lens, and they are a portal to a spirit world. And it's a spirit world that shamans mediate in this sort of muddle between light and dark realms, or so they believe. And there's less anthropological research on this in Gabon, where iboga's from, but certainly with ayahuasca, there's a long history of brujeria, black magic, kind of, occult sorcery, alliances with metaphysical entities, plant spirits. And, some people think that, it can even be like half and half. I mean, nothing's all good and all bad, but, half of shamans might be questionable characters. And certainly with my experiences with ayahuasca, that would be, borne out really. So it's really, really tricky. And, I think it requires, maybe taking off a kind of rationalist worldview to really get a complete understanding of psychedelics that maybe we are a little bit lacking, to then further understand what are some of the drivers of these kind of bad outcomes and indeed abuse. And so, yeah, I do think, as I've been at pains to stress, that ibogaine and psychedelics more widely have got incredible potential. And I mentioned in the Rolling Stone story that I had this moment where, I came back from the ibogaine trip and I was stopped on the street by an acquaintance who was just like, "Whoa, man, like, what got weight lifted off of you?" And this was like a week later, so I probably could have done the testimonial then. And at Beyond, the chap who did his treatment at the same time as me in the next bed, I mean, when he came in, he'd been taking fentanyl, crystal meth, benzos, like the hardest of the core, right? Like, fentanyl speedballs. And he was just so like kind of distant and a bit dissociated. You couldn't really look him in the eye. He was very like shifty, but lovely guy still, you could tell. But then after, and he told the clinic, the light is back in my eyes. I came in completely closed off and isolated, and we did a yoga class the next day together. So, I think when this is done correctly, incredible. But then the crazy thing is the two establishments that I've mentioned here, I know I said they present themselves as the market leaders, but they're kind of the good guys, like a lot of the other people doing sort of ibogaine and iboga treatments and ceremonies in South America, Central America rather, and elsewhere are, many like, dodgy characters. I hear a lot, because people, once I've done a few stories on this stuff, people email me, I've heard all sorts of stuff. But again, it's partly because of prohibition and the fact that kind of bona fide nurses and doctors, don't want to get involved in this. So what do we do? I would say more research, including in ceremonial settings, which generally does kind of, get overlooked. Decriminalization and regulation to help kind of bring this out of the shadows even more, and mean that it's not the sort of more kind of, boisterous chaps and ladies that kind of, get drawn to, risk incurring the long arm of the law through putting on these ceremonies and whatnot. I think there's a huge space in the psychedelic, world for a watchdog organization that maybe would have a sort of trip advisor kind of function. And obviously that would be fraught with kind of, potential legal issues if like, someone posts a bad review of a center and then they take out a lawsuit against them, which happens. But I do think there's a space for that. And, some people are going to be making some serious money very soon. So there should be money for it. And as I briefly introduced, I think honest conversations about the nature of shamanism and indeed neo-shamanism and, how a facilitator, a therapist, kind of how the condition, the state of their nervous system can kind of rub off on like patients, right? When they're in this hyperplastic state. If your shaman or your therapist is in a kind of dominant sympathetic fight or flight state, right? Like that's not going to be soothing for the person when they've just been blown wide open. And yeah, the ultimately mystical nature of psychedelics, I think, yeah, obviously it's complicated by all of our different kind of understandings of the nature of God and religion, and even within the same religion, different denominations. But I think if we can kind of talk more about, yeah, the visions we have and the downloads we have and the nature of the psychedelic experience, together, we can, yeah, really help to just collectively understand it all a lot more together. And yeah, indeed, lastly, I think the risks of taking iboga and ibogaine, while relatively small when done in accordance to rigorous protocol, and indeed saying no, like to some people, you're not ready. Those are the hard decisions people have to make. But when there's a financial incentive or imperative involved, those lines might get blurred. So yeah, that concludes. Thank you very much, you guys. Yes.
Phenomenal talk, and really such an interesting and perfect counterpoint to what Dr. Hinson was saying just before lunch. There is so much promise and so much healing potential, and there are definitely some things we need to watch out for. There's a way to do this right, and a little bit of skepticism about people promising the moon is very, very warranted.